Okay, hi everyone. As I said before, my name's Catriona, and I recently returned from maternity leave as well, Lottie. And so I'm just seeing things with a whole new perspective. But you might have met my colleague Kirsty, who was covering for me while I was off. Before I get started, I just want to say that you didn't realise, but you're part of Book Week Scotland today. So we have a national celebration of reading, and the theme this year is blether, which is a Scots word, which means conversation or chat or gossip. So I thought that it was actually quite appropriate today to just mention that. And if you want to see anything more about it, have a look on Scottish Book Trust's website. Okay, so just to start off with, I'm sure some of you are already familiar with Scotland, but we are a country that's part of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. The population is about 5.4 million, so quite small population. If you compare that with somewhere like London, which has 8.9 million, you see the size of population that we're dealing with. Our birth rate at the moment is around 51,000 babies every year, and our country is split into 32 local authorities. Just to give another example of the range of sizes of areas, in small parts of the country, for example, Orkney, which is one of the islands off the top of the country, there were 186 births last year, whereas Glasgow, which is a large city, had 6,548 births. So really diverse, different areas that we're working with. But as a book gifting programme, we work with all of those areas. We have a network of local contacts who help us facilitate everything, and they're mainly based within library services but also in education. And so just to give a little summary of what we do, it's very similar to other book gifting programs. We give 4 different bags to all children in Scotland, and they're all age and stage appropriate. And we also have bags that are translated into Gaelic, which is one of Scotland's national languages. And we run book bug sessions, which are story, song and rhyme sessions within library settings. We also have a large training programme that supports our work. And just in addition to that, we also support Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, which in Scotland is specifically for looked after children, so children that are care experienced. Just to start thinking about quality book gifting, I suppose a few years ago, we were looking at the research around quality book gifting, and most of our research was based on international studies or things that have taken place in the rest of the UK. We have looked to Bookstart in London a lot, but we wanted to commission our own research to have a look at specifically the Bookbug programme and ask quite a few different research questions. But one of them in particular, so these are the summary of the evaluation and what we wanted to look at. But in particular, we wanted to look at the book gifting process. We used a method of evaluation called contribution analysis, where we were looking at how Bookbug as a book gifting programme fits into the wider context of things like education and a whole range of other activities that might have an influence on a family's reading experience. So from that, we were able to pull down some really interesting findings. And for today, I just pulled out the key themes that I thought were relevant for the book gifting idea, and then some activities that we've done based on the recommendations from the report. So book gifting for us in Scotland looks either like this in terms of health visitors gifting books directly to families with young children. So that's for the baby and toddler stage, which is maybe between 1 and 2 years old. Or sometimes it looks like this, where it's within a nursery setting or early year setting. So that's for 3-year-olds, and then again in primary 1 when children first start school. So those gifting experiences can be quite different, I suppose, because in one context it's a one-to-one interaction, and in another it's perhaps with a whole group of children, perhaps also with their families involved as well. And so that looks quite different depending on what different bag you're talking about. So some of the key themes that came from our report, and you're welcome to have a look at it on our website. The first was around the timing and consistency of gifting being a really important factor, and the quality and consistency of the messages for parents, and the relationships that parents or carers had with a trusted professional. The idea of excitement at receiving a quality item, and then also thinking about our training and other support for professionals. So I'll go into a little bit more depth on each of those 5 topics. So first of all, looking at the timing and consistency of the bag. So we give a recommended time of when the bag should be gifted to all families. The evaluation fortunately did show that we had a very strong link to Scottish national strategic priorities. So we try very hard to make sure that we fit in with what is being suggested as best practice in terms of health, but also in terms of education. And that helps on particular times of the gifting of the bag. And also it helps us really demonstrate the relevance of the programme for different professionals. So for example, this was a quote that came from one of the health visitors who are the nurses that work directly with families when they have very young children. And they said that the messages that we were giving were consistent with what they would be delivering as well. And that for us is very important, that we try and make sure our messages fit nicely with the professional messages, so that it's not seen as an added burden. It's more a supporting message around what they might already be discussing around speech and language development, brain development, bonding, attachment, and so on. So for example, I just wanted to pull out one thing that we found has been quite helpful in Scotland. It's fitting in with, we have a universal health visiting pathway, and it's expected that all children will pass through certain stages of this, and this is their interactions with the health service at various points. And we were really really keen to make sure that Bookbug was mentioned within that. So at the different stages, we have a reference in the guidance that's given to every single health practitioner that's working in this way. So you can maybe see, oh, sorry, I've gone, yeah, that's it. I've got a tiny little mention in the corner which says about Bookbug programme, but it links back to our website. And then we recommend that this information, the first Bookbug bag is given between 3 and 5 weeks, which is quite early on. But then we also ask for a repeated message at 3 months, when a lot of families are discussing things around singing and talking and reading with your baby. So that's just an example of that. We also link in with our national curriculum as well, and make sure that all of our things are relevant and link back to that. So moving on to the quality and consistency of messages for parents. This is something that came out in the evaluation as being variable depending on which part of the country you lived in. So it's really, we know that it's crucial, and a lot of parents in the evaluation told us that they appreciated when time was taken to look through the contents of the bag, when someone was able to go through and explain why the different elements were there, and also perhaps help with any questions. So for example, if they felt that they were not confident in reading aloud themselves, then to give some other strategies around using the pictures or having a conversation around the books. Also to reassure and maybe perhaps model the behaviour and show maybe how excited a baby is to see a book even when they're very tiny. So we realised that the quality and consistency does sometimes vary, and some of the tools that we have to try and ensure consistency are things like, we have a gifting guidance leaflet, and this is given again to all people who are representing us and giving out the bags directly to families. So it gives some really clear key messages that we would hope are given to every family, but also allows some extra information. So we have footage that's video content, so if it's easier for a family to see a video about what we're talking about, then that's there. There's also information about, as I mentioned before, if families are struggling with their own reading and writing, and how they can link back into other national initiatives that support that. So one thing as well that we've been working on since the evaluation came out is that when we asked practitioners about this advice, anyone who had seen the advice found it really helpful. They said it was like exactly what they needed in terms of having up-to-date information. However, a large proportion were unaware that it existed, and a part of that is because there's been lots of changes in the health service, lots of new members of staff coming on board, and so we've been working really hard to try and address that and make sure that the communication is better. So one of the simple things is making sure that there is one of these gifting advice leaflets in every box of books that go out to health centres, so it's always on the top, and it's the first thing that is seen when the person opens up the resources. And that is also important for just mentioning that it's not always our ideal person who gives the bag. So our ideal person would be the health visitor because they have that relationship with families. But sometimes because they're busy or because they need someone else to help out. It might be an administrator in the health centre or someone else. And so we just want to make sure that whoever is handing that bag over to families is giving the same information. And so the other thing that came up in terms of the person who was giving the bag was that the relationship between the family and that professional was absolutely crucial. If they had a really strong relationship with their health visitor, they saw them as a trusted and valuable source of information. And that for us helps in terms of, I suppose, justifying and arguing for why this is such a really important programme. So there's a couple of examples there of what parents said in terms of why they thought it was then important to read with their baby because they'd been told the information by someone that they trusted. However, that also has a sort of converse side, which can be difficult because it means if the relationship isn't good with that professional, then there's a risk that there's a sort of slightly damaging effect about the message. So for example, we had this comment from a parent where they said actually that the professional had not mentioned it and not given extra encouragement to start reading. And actually when they reflected on that themselves, they said, I wish I'd been given the extra encouragement. And for us, this is sometimes an issue, and I'm quite interested to hear what other people say, is that when we're working with practitioners that obviously know their stuff in terms of their profession, sometimes they will make a judgment call as to whether a family needs a message about books, or maybe make an assumption as to whether that family is already doing reading. And then there's a risk that people miss out on the information. So we have to kind of play a very careful balance between giving the trust to people to pass on that message for us, but also insisting that it's the same every time. So that's something that we're working on, and I'm keen to hear from everyone else about. So the other thing that I just wanted to mention was about this idea of excitement around the bags, and this kept coming through whenever people were talking about book bug bags, but I'm sure it's quite the same for your other book gifting programs. It was a really important factor that children or parents felt like this was something that they were being given as a gift, and they felt valued because of that. And particularly when we moved into looking at the older age bags, so the ones that are given to 3-year-olds and to primary 1 children, those bags are going directly to the children, and we spend a lot of time working with nurseries to try and get them to create a sense of excitement around the books. So if they do activities in the week before, they read the titles, and then the children get to actually take these books home, they maybe invite the parents in to have a bit of a celebration, then it just means that there's a bit more of a special occasion made around it. And I think the other side of that was about professionals, and they were really proud to gift something that was a really beautiful gift for families. It meant that they felt that it was something they really wanted to do and make part of their daily work, even though they are very busy people. So in order to support all our programs and activities, we have a lot of training, and it kind of loosely falls into 2 categories. And one is around supporting delivery of the core program, which is the book bug bags and book bug sessions within libraries. And then there's another side of training which is more about increasing skills among early years practitioners around things like using music to boost literacy and bringing picture books to life, that sort of skills-based stuff. So I suppose on training side of things, we're looking more at how we support professionals to give the bags to families. And traditionally, we've done a lot of face-to-face training. We operate that all across Scotland, but we know that just due to Scotland's geography, a lot of people living in rural locations can't actually come to face-to-face training. There's also kind of a restriction on budget. So we're really exploring options for ongoing support at the moment. And one of the things we're looking at is ideas like the Zoom meeting and webinars to try and upskill people or get to practitioners who wouldn't be able to take time out to come to face-to-face. for some specific groups, we've started piloting an online training course, and that was specifically around staff and volunteers that work within neonatal settings, so within a hospital with very premature or very sick babies. And the idea for trialling that course was because it was very difficult to get all practitioners together due to shift patterns and the fact that they might be coming in overnight, and we couldn't always have a trainer available. So we trialed this as an online course, and it's something that we've had positive feedback about, but we kind of want to develop a little bit more, and we see potential to use that for not only existing professionals, but people who are students about to go into these professions. So previously we've done a lot of work with college courses and universities to try and get people before they enter the workplace. But again, that's quite a time intensive and expensive process. So we see this as perhaps a means of doing a small module that students can complete before they do their course, and that can be built into the curriculum at the sort of discretion of the lecturer. So that's kind of on the horizon as something that we're working on. But we really do also see the value of face-to-face activity, and this again is something that came out of a recommendation in the report, was more opportunities for practitioners to get together and share ideas. So we previously done maybe a couple a year big national events where people could come together, but actually we found it was more helpful to run them in smaller geographical locations, maybe one or two local authorities, and bring together people from across different backgrounds and working with the Bookbug programme in different ways. And the main reason for that is, I suppose, to make connections, to refresh practice and get ideas about what's happening and how it might work in their area. And that's where we see lots of good examples of how book gifting practices is going well. It works particularly well where it can connect into other local activities. So for example, if the person giving the bag also understands what sessions are happening within their local area, then it's much more effective. And then just to kind of summarize some of the future things that we're looking at that will have an impact on the book gifting idea. One is around antenatal. So in Scotland we have recently adopted the Finnish baby box model. So families receive a box of resources, material things for their new baby before the baby's born, and we have 2 books that are included in that. However, the box is just sent out without any message, so we miss out on that opportunity for interaction with a trusted professional and all the things that we've identified as being important from our evaluation. So we're looking at specific support that's for families that might need extra help, and so that's one of the groups that was identified in our evaluation was young parents. So we focused most of our attention on young parents for the start of this project, and we've tested it in 3 different NHS locations within Scotland, and we're looking to try and roll that out over the next year. We are also, as I think I mentioned earlier on, looking at an ongoing pathway of support for people who have been trained by us, because coming to face-to-face training once isn't enough really to continue to develop them and make sure everyone's up to date with the most current information. So we're looking at ways to develop that, and a lot of it will focus on digital. I think just from a cost perspective, it's not to say that we won't still do face-to-face activity, but that's definitely a big focus for us. And then finally, just a very small mention of, we have a Bookbug app, which is free for families and practitioners to download. It really does focus on songs and rhymes at the moment, the other sort of part of the messages that we give, not the book gifting, but we're looking at how to include some really strong messages about book gifting for families within that app. So that's going to be phase 2 of that development. Unfortunately, it's not available to download outside of the UK at the moment, but we're working on an international version that will be available at some point. So that's just a summary of everything I kind of thought maybe linked into this topic. I'm really happy to answer any questions if you've got them, or pass on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Catriona. I'll say that again, that that was such a wonderful findings you shared with us. I'm surprised on how in details you run the program so well. Yeah, I definitely love to visit your website. So I think Dayden has a question for Catriona, please. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, it's a question for Catriona and for the other presenters. We're building a literature review of international best practice, and it was just to ask if they could share what your research findings. I've said that the evaluation is on the website. I'll go and download that now. But for the other presenters, if there's anything you can share with us on Dropbox or whatever, that would be brilliant and really helpful. Much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely fine. The evaluation's on our website, and I'll send a link afterwards. And I think as part of that, there's quite a comprehensive literature review as well, which might link back to what you're doing as well. So also, we're still in contact with the researcher who did our project, from the Centre for Research on Families and Relationships, which is based at University of Edinburgh. And I know that she's really keen to kind of continue to share that information. So if it's helpful for me to put you in touch with her, I'd be really happy to do that as well.
That would be brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And also, I'd like to mention that the PowerPoint files will be uploaded. You can see it on the EU Read website later on, Peter. Is that going to happen?
Yes, the PowerPoints will be uploaded, and in due course the films will be there too.
Yeah, because it would be nice. I couldn't write it down today, so it would be nice to have a look later on again. Thank you. Okay, so Lotte has a question as well for Catriona, please.
Yes, I was wondering if you do your only partner that you have is in healthcare, or do you also work with libraries?
Yeah, we work really closely with libraries. The library part is mainly around the book bug sessions, so the interactive stories and the rhyme sessions. But libraries also and we always let families back to the library. So although the logistical and the gifting side is mainly health and education, libraries also provide a kind of backup for us as well. So if a family has missed out on getting their either by moving or maybe not going to a particular appointment when you would normally get your bag, that's a secondary distribution for us as well. We see them as a really, really strong partner for that.
Thank you, Catriona. Okay. Does anyone else has a question for Catriona? Okay. Thank you, Catriona, for the presentation.